Funny story, just a few hours after I uploaded my video about sexism, this one, a friend of mine sent me a link to this article, Man of Neil. And the funny aspect is that he did not know about my channel, not to speak about this video. And this article goes in a similar direction. It's also about issues with this gender fight, or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to present this article to you and comment on how I personally perceive some of the aspects presented in it. And before I start this, just one short side note about this video. I'm going to make a follow-up video in which I address a lot of the things I misrepresented and which I kind of got wrong, and the whole terminology thing in the first half of the episode. Now about this article. It is about a book called Men on Strike by Helen Smith. As we are going to learn, she is an ex-feminist and a psychologist, and she has a rather critical view on certain aspects and how they develop nowadays. How did society reach the point where a lawsuit filed this week alleged a man working at the desk of Planet Fitness on Bay Shore, Long Island, was too afraid of repercussions to enter the ladies' room to administer CPR to a dying woman? He said he didn't know what to do and that he wasn't allowed to go into the ladies' bathroom, a witness said in an affidavit. Admitted, this opening story sounds a bit extreme, but I give it the benefit of a doubt that this might actually have happened. Even so, I would say that this is an absolute unique case, because I doubt that most men in this situation would freeze in apathy and don't do anything just because they are torn between two rules. The rule to save a life and the rule that they are not allowed in the women's bathroom. But the point where this story becomes more than just an anecdote about a man without the ability to make a decision on himself is the fact that the second rule, the rule not to enter the ladies' room, was so imprinted in his mind as something so absolute that he puts it above a human life. A poll conducted on behalf of a British children's charity reports that many men refuse to join because they fear being labeled pedophiles. A British Airways passenger sued the airline because he was forced to change seat in accordance with the carrier's policy that no man be allowed to sit next to a child, even one accompanied by his parents. Don't worry, there's a perfectly great middle seat for you in the last row, guys. Next time take the bus. I actually can't tell which of those two stories I think is more disturbing. The first one is showing that there is this kind of common understanding within the public that men, as soon as they do anything in favor of children, automatically only do it because they have pedophile tendencies. And that this misunderstanding went to a point where men themselves have to fear getting labeled just out of acting this way. And the second story, on the other hand, is showing that this kind of thinking reaches such a serious level that a business, a company, actually is putting this into their policies, which is a completely different version of disturbing. In Illinois, 20-year-old Fitzroy Barnaby was convicted of unlawful restraint of a minor, a sex crime, and was placed on the sex offender registry after he grabbed the arm of a 14-year-old girl to lecture her on not dashing into the street in front of a moving car as she had just done. Okay, let me get this straight. There's a little girl running on a street, nearly get hit by a car, and there is this bystander who grabs her on the arm, maybe even pulls her out of the danger, and lectures her. Let's look at the story with the skeptical glasses on. He may have grabbed her really hard. She may even have taken bruises from this incident. And in the rush of adrenaline he probably felt in this moment, he might have shouted at her and gave her a little bit of a shock. But none of these actions are in any way sexual. And this poor guy ended up on a sex offender registry for trying to talk sense into a stupid little girl who is endangering herself in traffic. And as far as I know, being on the sex offender registry in America is a really big deal and can pretty much cripple your career. But Americans, feel free to correct me on this one if I am wrong. On a blog called Parent Dish, a reader said he stopped coaching girls soccer after an 8-year-old player told him, "I don't have to listen to you, I can get you in trouble just by telling people you touched me." You have to consider what this anecdote implies. An 8-year-old girl does not get the idea on herself to threaten an adult man this way. somebody has actually taught this girl that this is the way to act towards a man. I can only imagine that there is some kind of bigot feminist, probably the mother, I don't know, I'm speculating right now, but that this person raised her daughter in the understanding to act this way. And this is just wrong for so many reasons. First of all, to teach young, impressionable minds that this is the right way to react to the opposite gender. I don't want to meet this girl when she grows up in case she did not get her head fixed until then. This way of facing off a man implies first that all women are victims, and second that all men are, in this case, pedophile beasts. And the third thing is, this would not be a threat if that man had not actually to fear to get into trouble. And I can tell you from personal experience that this is actually a real issue. Because about a decade ago I was a participant in a workshop for upcoming holiday travel guides for youth groups, and one thing we as upcoming tutors had been taught was that the man among us should avoid under any circumstances to go alone to a girl's room on one of the trips. Take at least a second man with you, but in the best case, send a female tutor. Because if you go up there on a girl's room as a man alone, you risk that the girls will make up a story afterwards, you get sued, and the people will believe the girl. And that you have to prove your innocence. This was a decade ago, and this was in Germany, a country which is not so trigger happy with suing people as certain other countries. In other words, this was an actual issue, otherwise they wouldn't have taught me that. In England, a man passing by 2-year-old Abigail Rare, who later drowned, declined to help guide her to safety because he feared being labeled a pervert. Well, just another example of a tragic consequence of the fact that men get villainized and have to face off against all this labeling. Everywhere you look, men are AWOL. Have they declined to show up or have they been kicked out? Both, says Helen Smith in a new book citing these alarming examples and others. Men on Strike notes that men have disappeared from campus, where nearly 60% of undergrads are female. From the workplace, the percentage of male employment hit an all-time low last fall, down from 87% to 70% in the past 65 years. And from the family, the American birth rate is just above an all-time low, and more than half of women under 30 giving birth are unmarried. I have to admit I have checked none of those statistics, but even if I take into consideration that they might be exaggerated, I believe the tendency those statistics are presenting is real. Tired of being labeled defective women, wary of the financial traps of marriage and fatherhood, hammered by the disappearance of construction and manufacturing jobs, disgusted by the presumption that their sexuality is a scary disease, men are shrugging and turning away. I myself never had to face off against those issues listed here, but I have heard of all of those issues before at some point. The rules of the game have been tilted against men in every field this side of coal mining, black lung being one of the few male privileges the ladies are happy to cede. Family courts hold men financially liable even for children conceived by women who falsely claim to be using birth control, while at colleges the presumption of innocence has been withdrawn for men accused of sexual misbehavior. One person lies to another person in order to get money from this second person. I believe there's a word for it. It is a scam, and the court is supporting this. Let me get this straight, I'm not against the fact that men have to financially support women they had children with. But in the very moment this law gets used by women to scam men, the law gets corrupted. They pretty much weaponize a law that was invented to support them. Great job. Uncle Tim's, male feminist lapdogs eager to curry favor to their female and feminized masters, are everywhere, Smith notes. Yet one man quoted in the book reports dropping out of college after being accused of maladjustment and subjected to horrified looks when he said he might buy a gun someday. Well, I live in Germany, and if somebody would tell me that he is definitively going to get a gun somewhere down the line, I may accuse him of maladjustment as well. But this happened in America, where the Second Amendment in the Constitution pretty much says, hey guys, having a gun to protect yourself is your right. Discussing this law is a topic for itself, but as things are, I do realize that having a gun is something very mundane and common in America, and ostracizing somebody for exclaiming that he is about to do what is his right, given by the Constitution and what millions of other Americans do as well. This pretty much implied that he, as a man, is not allowed to make use of the Second Amendment. What? A video gaming blogger notes of fellow enthusiasts, it's bizarre how some of them are in their 20s, have graduated from good schools and have simply zero interest in women. As a video game enthusiast myself, still in my 20s, I can tell you I am and have been for the last couple of years very interested in women. And hearing that this interest apparently seems to fade for a lot of fellow guys may have a lot of reasons, but considering all the circumstances we just heard about, I can imagine that this social wrongs drove the guys away from women. Needless to say, there is not a renowned, powerful national organization for men to lobby against these grim and worsening realities, and if there were, it would be treated by a joke by those who didn't dedicate themselves to eliminate or feminizing it the way they destroyed so many traditional all-male associations. Helen Smith was once a feminist when that stood for equality and fairness. Now it means female privilege, she writes, and I believe discrimination against men is every bad as discrimination against women. Yes, of course it is. And how stupid do you have to be to believe that the best way to fight discrimination is with more discrimination? Now we have a society in which not only women get discriminated, no, we have a society in which both genders get discriminated. Hooray! This is progress, dear people. She concludes by urging men to speak up more, to get their point of view across in public forums, to stand up for their rights in courts and on campus. But as a psychologist, she has intimate knowledge of fractured relationships from people she had counseled, and she advises women that they also have much to gain by keeping men from fading out of the picture. It's a myth that men won't talk about their feelings, she says. If they are silent, it's because they think they won't get fair hearing. Listening without judgment, focusing on the positive aspect, and resisting the temptation to complain about him, especially to third parties, can be useful in keeping a man around. Polls show that women's happiness has steadily declined over the last 5 decades, even as women enjoy unprecedented success in educational and career terms. But if men catch a cold, society sneezes. We tell men they are worthless perverts who reek of male privileges, while simultaneously castrating them should they act in a manly manner. And now women are upset that men are becoming more feminized? Smith writes, "You reap what you sow." Amen, sister. Now, what are my overall thoughts about this article? First, I want to point out that you have to take this article with a bit of salt, because this is an article promoting a book, and this book is probably very biased about the whole issue and presenting it rather one-sided, showing all the extreme cases. So you have to be cautious about the picture this article is drawing. Having said this, the issue this article is addressing is real. I told you the anecdote about the tutor workshop, and I can also tell you that sometimes when my nephews, who are still very young, come close in way of playing or something, I sometimes have thoughts like, hopefully nobody sees this in the wrong light. This kind of mindset already reached me, and I can totally see that men with less self-esteem who live in a far more hostile environment are really suffering, and the way many of them see is probably to avoid the whole issue and, by extent, women in general. And this is a horrible direction. As I said before, fighting discrimination with discrimination is wrong. Villainizing men in general and taking away the presumption of innocence just because there are, without any doubt, many bad apples, but so are on the other side. This is not the solution. So, yeah, this article, I put the link into the description so you can check it for yourself. And I also just came across a video by Straughan called "The Perils of an Ideological Approach," where she introduced a rather critical view on the feminist movement. My personal stand is pretty much the one Helen Smith explains in her book as well, aiming for fairness and equality. In the best case, stop looking at genders in general and stop thinking in these categories of genders. and turning men into these villainous creatures is doing pretty much the opposite, because you just make the divine between man and woman even bigger instead of getting rid of it. But I have talked about this long enough for now. Leave your own opinion down in the comments below. If you consider this video worth watching, please share it, because this channel is still rather new and a little bit of exposure is very welcome. I'm ANY, opinion counts.